Okay, you're unmuted, so. Can you hear me? Yeah. All right. Cool. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, and I know you need to be done by 10 tonight. We can just kind of roll with a shorter episode. Um, and I'm just hoping this Wi-Fi holds up plenty good. Um, yeah. Yes, I am. Yeah, I played the course. I played a little bit yesterday. I got in yesterday. So I played a little bit yesterday and then um, played the whole course today. Um, yeah, just the beast. Which I don't know, it's good. They made a couple more changes and it's like fairly solid. Not anything too crazy, but
Yeah,
it's nice.
it's Waco.
Yeah, exactly. Um okay, let me just share this on my story. Oh, a second. We're people are seeing us.
Oh,
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Forum Lab podcast, where we talk about all things disc golf forum. I'm your host, Tristan Tanner. I'm joined by my co-host, Matt Givens. Hello,
Howdy,
Matt.
everyone. Hi, good to
You
see
are
you.
still at home. I am somewhere different this time around.
I just got home,
You
so
did? Oh yeah, you were in
yeah,
Mobile, or right for
yes,
a tournament. I think I saw.
yes.
How
Didn't go
how'd you
great.
do in that? No,
No,
damn,
I was
not what
I
we
was
want to
quite
hear.
rusty.
Okay.
Yeah, well, Michigan winters apparently take more of a toll on you. Um, yeah,
Yeah. Have
new
you been able
bag.
to play much?
I've tried as best as I can.
Yeah.
All things permitting between my schedule wasn't quite enough. Between that and having an entirely new bag, I can't be too mad at myself, but
Yeah.
still because they are my home courses.
For sure. The new bag I feel like really does make a big difference in,
But
yeah, it's
sorry,
like
go ahead.
more than people give credit for. Sorry, I think we were breaking up a little bit. But I think it was
That's
more open bag or different bag gives people a much harder time than I think that it's given credit, you know? I think people
yeah,
talk about all the time like tour players when they switch manufacturers, and some
yeah,
players like right off the top of my head is like Alden Harris, who had a
right,
really great season, his last season with Prodigy, and then switched over to a new bag and just kind of didn't have the season he had the prior year. He's still a good player, yes, but he didn't have that whatever top 15 season that he had the season before. And maybe
for
he'll
sure.
get to that with his bag, but you know, a lot of these players who are sponsored by the same company for such a long time just know their discs so well. And like so many players
Yes,
do, you know. I know so many people who've been with the same sponsor for 5 years and had discs that are older than that in their bag, you know, discs that they threw before getting their sponsor, and then
yeah,
like people, and then they like bring them back when they get responsored again. So I do think that that gives a little bit more trouble than people give credit for. Not saying that that's
yeah.
your issue necessarily with the tournament, because obviously there's some
Well,
more factors, but
I am a very particular person when it comes to discs.
yeah,
I find ones that I like and I really stick to them. And obviously, I like my Prodigy discs. I just haven't been able to play with them enough to know the ins and outs of them.
for sure.
And especially the particulars really kill you when it comes
Yeah,
to the course I was playing, which is super wooded. So things that were off by a couple feet, obviously in the woods, that turns into danger and potential bad breaks, and that's basically what happened to me. Again, along with just some rust, but it's okay. First event of the season. I do have a silver lining from it though, which is
okay.
today was ratings update, and for the first time, I finally broke the 1,000 rated mark.
Oh,
So I can
round of
officially
applause for
stop
Matt.
caring about rating.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
W's
yeah. Thank
W's in
you.
the chat for Matt or for Mac.
Big W's.
That's
Big
great, dude.
W's.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
So
mean,
ratings no
just
longer matter to me. Don't ask me about them.
yeah, sure, sure. Until your rating goes back below 1,000, and then you'll care about them again.
Well, yeah.
But hopefully that doesn't happen.
Right.
Obviously, we don't want that to happen. It is
Of
funny
course.
how the first time breaking 1,000 really does like make a difference. You know, it's
Yeah.
like wow, okay, I finally did it. You know, like that's like kind of everyone's like career
Yeah.
goal
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
disc golf is trying to get to that point. So that's
Yeah.
kind of funny. But congrats.
Well,
Kind of
it was interesting because I played pretty bad. It's
okay.
interesting because I played kind of bad this weekend, so I wasn't feeling great. And then it basically I hadn't played a tournament in so long that I had like 5 months of rounds that fell off, and they also happened to be like the worst rounds that were being counted. So even though I
Okay,
played bad this
interesting.
weekend, all of my bad rounds fell off.
Did you average below 1,000 at Mobile?
Yeah, but the other thing
Okay,
that helped
huh.
is that I played a flex start before the tournament, and then the actual tournament itself didn't get officialized until or in time for this ratings update. So I had
Oh,
the one
nice.
round that like got rid of all of like dropped all my stuff, and then my bad rounds from the tournament didn't get put on. So it's kind of the perfect storm for me.
That's like, yeah, that sounds great. Now you just got to try to find a couple good tournaments in there before the next update so you can hold it.
Yeah,
Should
exactly,
be solid.
exactly.
Nice.
Well, we're at like
Well,
1,004, so there's a little bit of a buffer.
oh, yeah. Yeah, ton of
Yeah,
buffer. That's perfect. Um, okay, cool. So you brought up a topic for us to talk about today a little bit earlier. You texted it to me. There is this thread that I've seen too, and it's been
yeah,
pretty popular on um, Facebook, I guess it is. I feel like I've seen it posted on like Reddit as well, and
hmm
it's probably kind of going around everywhere because I feel like just the topic is something that you know everybody wants to talk about, and I would assume this guy kind of cross posted it. Um,
yeah,
but basically, and you guys can see it on screen here, but the question is, could someone please explain this tilt that Eagle has? Watching other form videos, you see other pros doing this tilt. Why and is it why or why question mark? And it's not for hyzers either. It's as the bottom two are flat shots. There has something to do mechanically that they're doing this specifically for Eagle.
yeah, yeah. So I think from what I was reading in the comments, this one I sent you might have been a repost of the initial one
Yeah,
that didn't include the eagle picture, but eagle does do this. It gets the point across. And
yeah.
I'm
It
curious to
is.
see what you think about this because not all pros do this. One specific prevalent example is Paul Macbeth doesn't really have the shoulder tilt. And what we're talking about, if you aren't clear on it, is the back shoulder being higher, noticeably higher than the throwing shoulder.
Yep.
And so getting this, I'm curious what you think the reasoning for doing this is.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of interesting because, like this guy mentioned, it's not for purely for hyzers. Like, I think for hyzers, it makes a ton of sense. Like, obviously, like you're tilting down that right shoulder, you can kind of come up across it more and throw that hyzer angle. Uh, but like you mentioned, like Calvin is like an Anheuser thrower, Gannon is an Anheuser thrower. A lot of the players that do this are Anheuser throwers. So I think it is more of like a technical aspect more so than anything. I just think naturally for the disc golf swing, you have to be in an athletic position, which is going to have your shoulders in front or more towards your toes than like your butt is. So where your hips are hinging, your shoulders are naturally going to be farther forward than that, which makes it so then if you take your shoulders, they're just rotating on the same plane as they would be on flat ground, but you're actually tilting forward.
Yeah,
And then I think there is some sort of correction and can be a correction of almost like for these guys throwing Anheuser, they're just keeping their right shoulder down as they go to pull through, which would kind of keep you on more of an Anheuser angle. And I
right.
think Gannon's kind of a weird one to me because he throws, I feel like fairly nose down, or at least like past, I'd say lower than zero. I don't know how
Yeah.
far, if he's 1 degree, if he's 3 degrees, but I think he's below zero nose angle wise. So he's a little confusing to me. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that. But I think Calvin makes sense because Calvin tends to be a slightly nose up guy.
Yeah.
So he can get
Yeah.
that, keep that right shoulder down for the Anheuser, which is then, also keeping the nose up a little bit more, but getting the Anheuser release. So I think it is just a technical thing, but I'm kind of curious what you have to say or if you have any thoughts on it and specifically the like Gannon being in that
Yeah.
position.
It's interesting that you talked about the being athletic because I agree with you. But on the Paul point, it's almost like a little bit self-refuting because so the small backstory is I caddied for Kevin Kiefer at Deagla this year, and Paul was on the card, and we were talking about at one point how he tries to at all points in time be on his toes,
Yeah.
because he made the point like in what sports are you ever playing off of your heels? Very few, right?
Yep.
So Paul is very toe centric on his throws, and yet we still see kind of a flat shoulder playing for him. Um, so that it's kind of an interesting point, and this form, I guess technique, if you want to call it, is a little bit confusing to me. My best guess is that I think it's to make space for your pull through, right? So in
Okay.
the same way that
Yeah.
bending over to the side makes space for your elbow to come through on a forehand, it's kind of the same deal where bending
Great point.
over makes space for your elbow and for the disc to move through in still a powerful position and get
Hmm.
deep into that power pocket. Now, there's ways around it, obviously, not everyone throws like that, but I think it's a really easy way to get a little bit more of that distance between your torso and your pull through without having to be like way up here.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I do think it is kind of an efficiency thing because you can be up here and pull through and have plenty of room for the disc, but it's just like you said, not a very powerful position to be in.
Yeah.
Whereas you can be a little bit lower. And I do think, combination of that, the tilt forward with the hips staying back, then naturally the lower you're going on your torso, the closer the disc should be traveling to your actual center of gravity. And
Hmm.
obviously, especially in a rotational movement, the closer you can get whatever object that you're trying to get to go fast, in this case it's the disc, the closer you can get that to your center of gravity, the faster it's going to go. And so
Yeah.
I do think, yeah, the more you lean over, and with that hinge, you can just get the disc closer to that center of gravity, creating more
Yeah.
speed, a cleaner pull through, more consistency. So it does make total
And
sense in my mind.
one thing that I noticed is all of the people that were listed for doing this shoulder tilt, and I think in general this is probably true, maybe not across the board, but they're all pretty tall and lanky. So you got
Yeah.
Calvin, Eagle, um, and Gannon. Obviously, they're all giants, right? And then you're comparing it to say Paul, who is a normal sized human being with
Yeah.
like normal proportions. So like for these guys, they have much longer like biceps. And
Yep.
so them being way out here is putting relatively more strain on their shoulder than say
Yes.
Paul is because they have more distance.
Yes.
Right. So I think that might also have something to do with it. Not to say it's true across the board, but I think more often you might see lankier people doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, totally agree. And another key difference, I think, and you can kind of see it in the picture with Gannon and Calvin here on the post, but uh, naturally, I think like Calvin for sure kind of reaches around. He's
Yeah.
not wide railed like Paul is. Gannon's pretty straight on his reach back. And I do think that does make a big difference too. Because the more around you are on your reach back or the straighter you are away from the target kind of through your body, the more you do need to do that forward tilt to get the disc through. Whereas Paul is
Yeah.
traditionally wide railed. So he can be more upright, rotate a little bit, more even with his shoulders, but he's so wide railed that he has the room to still get it in front of his shoulders while he's pulling through. Where I don't think Calvin or Gannon has the same luxury in that aspect. We lost Mac here for a second, unfortunately. I'm sure he'll be back soon. Uh, but it is kind of interesting. I would stress you guys to kind of try to look at this. Okay, you back, Mac?
Yeah. I am back.
Just a second.
We're working with some Bobo internet tonight, so
Okay, there we go. Yeah, this is definitely my fault because of my connection.
mine was
My
acting up too. So maybe it's both of us.
Yeah, my Airbnb network connection trying to handle streaming and a live call uh while also looking some things up on the internet all at the same time. I don't think is optimal.
Yeah.
Um but I was just saying how it is interesting, like things like this that most people probably don't really think of at all, but are kind of consistent a lot of across a lot of top professionals, like this shoulder tilt. And you see like two very different forms in Calvin and Gannon, both doing the same thing. It is probably one of those fundamental form form pieces that you know probably maybe everybody should try to implement.
Yeah. Quick question from the chat. Steven asked, can we check wrist curl and how that impacts the throw? I notice it's easier to pull throws like this. I know you're a big proponent of wrist curl, so I'll let you take this one off the rip.
Yeah, I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago, but I,
Yeah.
I do like wrist curl, and I'm a big advocate for wrist curl purely just to get people away from doing the garbage open wrist pull through crap.
Yeah.
I hate when I see people do that because if you're in this open wrist position as you're pulling through, like you just can't create any spin at all. Like there's no shot. You're like
For
completely
sure.
screwed in that way. So I'm just a proponent of like I just want you at all in any way curled. As long as you're not open, I'm totally cool with it. I'm not like, you have to be curled this amount or you have to be curled this amount. I just want you on the curled side, not open, and I think that creates more spin.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think that wrist curl is essential because no matter how you're throwing it, no matter how hard or soft, you're always having to do this motion, right? You have to spin the disc in order for it to fly. So it is important for you to have some amount of wrist curl. You don't have to do the super, you know, tucked in Matteo or maybe even Ricky wrist curl.
Yeah,
But a little bit is always better than none.
yeah, yeah. No, totally agree. Um, do you have Mac? You have something else you
All
wanted to
right.
talk
So
about
you want to
tonight, huh? Gosh, this
Yeah,
damn
so I was
Wi-Fi.
going to bring up one of my it's okay. We'll just predict so I am going to get into some of my topics. We
Okay.
don't have a name for it. We'll just call it Max Soapbox. I don't know.
Yeah.
But my question for you is, do you have to be a good player, basically?
Unfortunately, Mac, you just broke up for that whole entire thing, so we're gonna need you to say that again.
Okay. My question to you is, in disc golf specifically, do you have to be a good player to be a good coach?
Okay. I think for straight up, no. I don't think you do. Uh, I do think that at this time where disc golf is, most of the players who have enough experience to in coaching or the learning process of disc golf or disc golf form as a whole are higher level professionals, either previous or current. Just because I don't think there are enough disc golfers for there to be a ton of coaches that are just like making a living off coaching or just falling in love with the technique of disc golf like you have in golf or baseball or any
Yeah,
other sport. You have people who are strictly coaches, like people who have never really played at a high level, coach people that are
yeah,
far better than they are but are very crafted, like that is uh their talent is knowing the form of their sport. And I don't think we're at the point in disc golf yet where you can just have random people uh, do that. I do think there are some here and
yeah,
there, but I think even those people tend to, like I'd say Blitz is an example. He's a coach on Form Arrow right now as well. And like, I don't think he's like a super skilled player. I think he's very knowledgeable about form, but
mhm,
he also throws very far and he happens to do it from a standstill as well. So
yeah,
he has that one little aspect, but I wouldn't say he's like a, a a guy who's like competing at a high level, or maybe he might not even play open. I don't know if he plays tournaments at all or competes, but he is very
yeah.
knowledgeable in the form aspect of it. But I think he's one of the few guys that is not whether it's professional or just a better player in general that knows about this stuff.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting for disc golf in particular. because I agree that you don't have to be a high level player in order to, coach someone on proper form in general in sports, right? That is
Hmm.
obviously true for things like golf. There are plenty of club pros or even just like local guys that really are knowledgeable, but for whatever reason they couldn't make it at a high level or didn't have the time or money to put into it, right? That's obviously true there. But
Yep.
I think in disc golf, because it's so new, we are just now on the precipice of having people that can be knowledgeable enough in a sport without having to like also be the people dominating at least their locals, right? Because you think about even the older guys, and if you were halfway decent by today's standards, you were probably killing everyone 20 years
Yeah.
the older guys. I don't know that I'm taking advice the same way now as I would have then from them. Like obviously stuff to learn from them, but at the same time, the game has evolved to the point where everyone on the tour has the ability to throw 500 feet. There might have been a handful of guys throwing 500 feet back then. And the
Yeah.
courses are changed, the game has changed to a certain extent. So I think it's because of the infancy of the sport. We're just now breaking into that point, like you're saying, where people, it, it's very few, but people could potentially make somewhat of a living in coaching. Not even that anyone necessarily is, but the
Hmm.
possibility is there now. So I think it's an interesting question. I am in general a little skeptical if you present yourself as a like form coach and you're just not worth your salt at all.
Yeah.
And I don't even think the bar is high, right? Like
Hmm.
for guys, I feel like you should be throwing 380 or something, right?
Yeah.
Like above 900 rated, that's not, I don't feel like that's a big ask.
Yeah. And I think too, it's there's a little bit of the skill or distance aspect with the form, but there's also like someone could do it with just like helping people or just coaching people around their local club. But I think it's like a separation from the typical things that people say for disc golf form. There are so many people who just regurgitate the
Yeah,
same stuff that everyone else has said that they saw from some, Paul Macbeth, Nate Sexton clinic uh, on YouTube. And we lost Mac again, folks. Gosh, this is painful. Okay, I'll continue my ramble here in a second once Mac gets back. All right, Mac, we have you back finally. Um,
perfect.
I was just going into a ramble about how I think there's so much like regurgitation going on in disc golf, especially about form talk. Everybody has seen the same like
Yep.
two like there's a Nate Sexton Paul Macbeth clinic and an Eagle and Simon clinic, or a Simon and Avery clinic, whatever it is, and everyone talks about the same stuff. And people keep posting. You get all these people posting YouTube videos saying the exact same thing that the last person said, with very little. I mean, there's a few people who I think do it well, and have their own opinions on disc golf form.
Yeah,
And I think a lot of the stuff we talk about on this podcast is kind of some uncharted territory to an extent of the way people think about
for
things.
sure.
So uh, I think there are or can be people who fall into that category that aren't professionals. But I think the self experimentation right now is one of the few ways that can get you to like kind of a free thinking form intellectual, we'll call
Yeah,
it.
yeah. It's oh, how high class.
Yeah,
Um,
uh,
yeah, no, I agree with you. It's most of disc golf YouTube is unfortunately where people learn their form basics from, which can be good, but the problem with that is exactly what you said, is it's a lot of regurgitation. and
Yeah,
then every once in a while it's a incorrect regurgitation, and so you end up teaching
absolutely.
something that isn't correct at all.
Completely
So
wrong.
it's the difference between, like memorizing something and then actually digesting and understanding the material for a test, right?
Yes,
It's the people that I in general trust the most for their disc golf opinions are the people that have struggled for years with their own form and figured it out, right?
yeah.
And that's just that trial and error, play around with it mentality that you were talking about. So I think we're on the same page here.
For sure. And it's kind of interesting that you brought up the timing of this, where like older players might not be in the same beliefs as newer players because, you know, how many years has it been that we actually have discs that can be thrown hard, you know? Like it's
Yeah,
not that many years since like the Destroyer came out. Like like
right.
or
Yeah.
maybe the Wraith was the first of its kind, but even then, I'd say the Wraith can't really hold up to the power. Like the Destroyer might have been the first, or I don't know if there was the Force or when those came into play, but it hasn't been that long that people have actually been able to throw hard with their discs. They weren't trying to throw DX cheetahs in the wind at USTGC,
Yeah.
but
True.
like there's so many people who were in that boat, and obviously that's a whole nother skill set. Like
Yeah.
having to know how to throw more nose up or more hyzer to like correct to make a disc fly more stable. That's obviously a skill set in of itself, but the true efficient disc golf swing, I think, couldn't really be born until the discs could handle the speed.
Yeah. No, 100%. I agree with you. Um, okay, so we had one more question from the chat. Uh, on your plant foot, how are you keeping your feet parallel all the way through from the X step to the throw? Is it important for power? Um, I'll take this one to start off. The answer is yes. It is extremely important. Um, the answer to how are you keeping it parallel? A lot of it is a mentality of your training and doing hundreds and hundreds of reps of it if you have this problem. Some people don't have this problem, it comes to them naturally. I was not one of those people.
Mhm.
It is the main thing that I see, one of the main things I see when I give form lessons is what I call an open plant foot, which means your plant foot toe is pointing at your target, and the reason that I explain this to be a bad thing is because if you think about your weight transfer, right? You're transferring weight, shifting weight from your back leg to your front leg. If you have this open plant foot, and if you're watching at home, you can stand up in your living room or whatever and do this experiment, right? Stand with that open plant foot stance and shift weight from your back leg to your front leg and feel how your body naturally wants to follow through with this. The answer is your knee wants to collapse. Your body wants to bend that knee and the force wants to go down into the ground, right? So instead of bracing that momentum and bringing it forward into the throw, you're now losing it and coming down, pushing down into the ground, as well as changing your your swing plane by like varying height and all this other stuff. It causes a lot of issues and it's a huge power loss. Um, yeah, I don't know if you agree with that or have a slightly different mentality on it. I'd be curious to hear.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think it's like very important. I think one of the easiest things you can do to lose power is that plant step. Maybe the plant step being a little bit open, I think is less important than the rear foot being pointed backwards. Actually,
Yeah,
I think that X step foot, people turn around, turn their hips and shoulders together, create no separation on the way through. So I think that rear foot is actually more of an issue, and people think, the more I can turn my hips back, the more power I'll have. But they really end up just like rotating everything from the hips up all at the same time. And they're creating
yeah,
no power, where they'd actually be better off taking a smaller X step, keeping that rear foot, horizontal, and making it so there can be more of a core stretch in the rotation, maybe a little bit of load in the hips, but not a full turn. And then they have the separation. They can kind of uncoil and create some lag and create some speed. So I think probably the rear foot being horizontal is more important than the plant, but I do think both are very important. And then one of the big aspects of this question was just like the how do you keep both feet horizontal. And I think it is really about, being intentional about what you are planting with both ways and how you are planting. And part of it, I think, is just purely a like hip flexibility thing. Would
Mm.
you agree with that? Like, I think some people are just limited in their hip
I would say
flexibility.
so for the back leg specifically. Yeah.
Yeah,
Because there is a lot of hip flexor mobility that you need in order to get that like full stretched coil that you're talking about.
yeah.
So yeah, I'd agree with that.
Okay. Yeah. So I think part of it is just the flexibility, but I do think just being intentional about the way you are planting. I think so many people are like reaching and trying to plant with a perfectly flat foot on their plant step, as opposed to, I like to say like and I think we've talked about it on here, but like the like ice skating or rollerblading or skiing, even, you're like pushing with the insides of your feet. And I think
Yeah.
that's an easy way to help get you wide, but also still, have a good, like, end up having a good even foot pressure. Because I do think it's hard to plant on the inside of your foot and be,
Hmm.
open towards the target when you're planting. So I
Yeah.
like the planting with the inside of the foot. I think some people maybe should actually take a narrower stance because of their hip flexibility so that they can get their feet
Right.
horizontal. But really, I think it just takes practice and probably staying a little bit more balanced overall.
Yeah, on the how, I do like your analogy for the inside of the foot. I've never thought of it that way. The one that I always teach is think about when you're doing your step out, instead of leading with your toe, I always say lead with your heel. So
Yeah,
it's gonna feel weird, but you kind of have to trust the fact that your body isn't going to like let you break your own ankle, right? So
yeah,
it's almost like tricking it to the point where you're fixing your foot from being here and like you're telling it to be here and then it goes to there, right?
yep,
And so that it's kind of like a calibration. So that's the main way I did it. A more extreme example is you can think about planting on your toe with that heel still forward and then rolling onto the heel. That's a more extreme way of thinking about it. A lot of it is what works for you because not all analogies or swing thoughts work for everyone, I've found. So this is where trial and error in the backyard and it comes into play, and knowing what your start point is and where your end point is, and the hard part is figuring out how to get there. But if you know what you're looking for, which is another reason coaching is important because they can break this stuff down for you, and give you tips on how to get there. But if you know where you're starting from and where you're going, it's going to make finding that path a lot easier. And a lot of people just know where they are and then kind of have an idea of where they're supposed to go, and then
yeah,
they just get lost in the sauce, basically.
totally agreed. One thing I do think that people can do to help transition, like, I think a standstill is a good way to work on this because you can just have your feet, like, you can set up with your feet horizontal, you know exactly where they are, and then you can throw. Uh, but to kind of transition into a run up, because I do think a lot of people run into an issue when they do the run up because they're trying to start pointed at the target and they're trying to turn to the side and then they end up turning too much, or not enough, or a combo of both. And I think just simplifying the run up into 3 steps. So just starting horizontal, obviously eyes on target, but almost like a like Corey Ellis throw of just starting horizontal
Yeah.
and purely just doing the step before the X step. So for me, it would be my right foot and then my X step and then my plant foot. And just doing those 3 steps, and your feet don't have to move any direction on that. They don't have to
Hmm.
turn forward, they don't have to turn backwards. They just stay like this and they just go boom, 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 you know. And I think
Yeah.
that's an easy transition drill to help train yourself after spend a little bit of time in the standstill first, and then kind of use that as a progression to the run up.
Yeah, I pretty much always prescribe people like a progressive workup to big form changes like this. Almost always start people with doing not only a standstill, but standstill starting from the full stretched out position, which people it's always a little weird at first because it's a very uncomfortable position. You do get used to it,
Yep.
Um, but I always say like start from that fully coiled, arm all the way back, foot all the way out, and then throw from there. And I'll tell people to just get used to being in those positions, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't, I say, I don't care where the disc goes. That's not important to me. I want you to feel comfortable with your body being in those positions. And once that
Yep.
happens, then you can go into those one step, like step outs.
Yeah.
And then you can do your like kind of modified two step, X step, whatever you call it, and then a really slow X step, and work it up that way. And you're taking out as many variables as possible while you're deliberately working on things. Because if you're like, okay, now turn your plant foot and do a full run up, you're going to be thinking about stuff and trip and fall over yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Yeah. Totally agree with that. And I think, yeah, progressing through, not just going from 0 to 100 in one throw session to try to work on something is the best way to do it. It's almost always better to, like you said, just take it one step at a time, quite literally in this case,
Yeah,
and progress up through the throw that way. Well,
yeah,
we didn't answer any questions last week, so I say we get to a couple questions this week. We do have to end the show a
yeah,
little bit earlier than we have in the past couple weeks, but let's do two questions, and then we'll kind of wrap it up from
yeah.
here.
We can at least get to. Let's see. Let's go with this question. Is there a cue or technique that is best for hitting narrow lines? Disc out late or early a lot? I guess he's saying he kind of spray and praise it.
Okay.
So
Um, I think mainly what I would assume is either this person has a major alignment issue of they're just like not running up on target very well, or they're probably most likely rounding in some sense or another. So
yeah,
I think one of the main things you can do to help this is just make sure you're reaching away straight away from the target, and try to have some sort of shoulder turn. I think it's easy when you have minimal shoulder turn and reaching around to spray it any direction. And I've seen this at many different levels. There's people who don't turn their shoulders much, have kind of a round reach back, and can throw very far. And there's people who have the same problem and throw it 180 feet. So I think mainly just a little bit more shoulder turn, and then make sure that you're reaching away straight away from that target line, and that's probably going to give you the best chance for success when hitting gaps or just hitting your line in general.
yeah. I think that's pretty straightforward. We've talked about the issues with rounding, and I would agree it's probably a rounding issue. So I don't have much to add. I think that's a good answer. I stamp of approval on Tristan's answer.
Perfect, Mac. Boom, done.
Let's go. Um, since we didn't answer some last week, let's run through some quicker ones about that,
Okay,
so we can get a few done. Let's see. What is a good stance for throwing a forehand?
I think you should head this one off.
Very general question.
Very
Okay.
general.
I think, yeah, I think the most basic or answer to this is toe pointed pretty close to your point of release that you want. One that I learned from my buddy Josh is that whatever line your toe is pointed at should be the most maximum amount that the disc is coming out. So you should never be pulling across where your toe is pointing. And he was
Okay.
a D1 pitcher. I believe him.
Yep.
um,
Checks out.
so yeah, so something like that, and in a position where you can get into your back hip so that you can generate power going forward into that front hip.
Mhm.
Now, there's a couple of different, at like a higher level, a couple of different techniques for bracing there. The one that I generally go with is kind of collapsing into that knee, but then straightening it out at the end and being really strong in those in your quads and
Yeah.
bracing that way, like bringing your momentum forward. Uh, but yeah, that in terms of stance, that's probably the most general one. I see some people with their foot turned away from target, and I kind of cringe at it. One, because I feel like it's going to break my ankle doing that.
Yeah. I
Your
have I
thoughts?
have I have two pieces of this. One, I think like you talked about the plant, I think the plant on a forehand, the easiest way to get yourself to brace is to just stomp as hard as you can. And if you go to a pro tour event and watch a forehand hole, you will see pros trying to break through the front of the tee pad, planting so hard. So I think for planting, stomp. And then kind of funny enough, how you mentioned your friend played baseball is I think for the forehand, like the front foot, like you said, pointed towards the target, and then the back foot kind of open, like almost like
Yeah.
pitchers when they're on the mound, their rear
Yep.
foot is completely open, pushing off the whatever the thing is on the mound. Please don't roast me. I have no
The
idea what it's
rubber.
called. The rubber, sure.
It's just called.
Uh,
Yeah.
the rubber. So when they're pushing off the rubber, their back foot is obviously open, and then they're planting with their front foot straight down the home plate. So I think that's probably a pretty good basis to go off of. That's what I like for my forehand. You can kind of experiment with that back foot of how far out you want to have it be, but I do think it's really easy to load power into that, and then kind of as you load the power into it, and if you're braced wide enough, you can push off that toe kind of the back foot and create some of that hip turn and just a lot of power.
Yeah, I agree. To take it one step further, are you a proponent of the shuffle step, the X step, or some Adam Hammis, Paul Macbeth weirdo magic on the walk up?
Yeah, I like the slow kind of hop slash shuffle. Like I like basically what I was describing in the backhand of just like a right step, left step, right step. In the forehand for me, it's just a left step, and then my right foot meets my that plant, and then I do my actual plant step. So it's really just a 3 step,
Okay.
pretty easy. Focus on a lot of that back leg push off. So really, it's just like kind of a setup step, and then uh, a long push off that rear foot as I'm going to plant.
So are you doing sort of like a creeping walk up, or are you ever like both feet off the ground at any point?
I am nowhere close to both feet off the ground. Like, and I
Gotcha.
don't think that's good. I literally like probably at one point in the throw have 100% of my weight like directly over my back foot, like, and then push
Yeah.
off very, very hard. Like I have a very slow run up. Probably, I mean, up there for the slowest run ups of forehand throws, to be honest.
Yeah, so I don't know if I've ever talked about this. I'm ambidextrous. So I played baseball
Oh my
left-handed
gosh,
for 12 years. Yeah, so I
you're a
had to
genius.
teach myself from scratch. I'm amphibious is what my friend Josh likes to say.
An
Um,
amphibious
but oh,
thrower.
yeah. But I had to teach myself pretty much from scratch how to throw righty forehands, and so I
Mhm.
experimented a lot with all sorts of different walk-ups. And the one that
Yeah.
I landed on, felt the best to me, was actually the little Nate Sexton shuffle, where
Okay. The
it's the
Sexton
same
hop.
motion you're talking about. Yeah, but it's not the. I guess it's closer to a big germ than a sexton. It's somewhere in between. Sexton does
Okay.
like his kind of up and then into his back leg and then forward. Mine
Yeah.
is more of like a stay on the same plane, both feet. You're kind of like your ankles like you're Dorothy or something. Like you're clicking
Okay.
your ankles
Yeah. A
together.
little clap and then go. I like it.
Yeah, yeah. So it's interesting. I don't think there's one right way to do it. I think it's just whatever gets you into that position. It's kind of unlike backhands where unless you're Corey Ellis, pretty much everyone's just doing X steps.
Well, Corey Ellis still does an X step too. He just does it from like
He does
three
like a
steps.
two-step X step.
Yeah, exactly. He
It's
just does the X step. He doesn't do anything
yeah,
else.
right.
Exclusively an X step throw.
That's true.
Um, that's crazy. I
Okay.
really didn't know you're amphibious though. I think we'll have to
I
dive into it in another another podcast. Maybe a
uh-huh.
podcast where we cover what disc golf would be like underwater.
Okay.
But we'll get
Yeah,
into
yeah.
that where it comes. Let's do
I'd
one more
I'd be
question
really
and then we'll
good at
wrap
it.
it up. Yeah, you'd be the best.
Yeah. Okay. This one's simple. Why can't I make putts?
Um, you know, I think it's
Go ahead,
this is
Tristan.
a
Fix this
harder
putting form.
yeah, this is a harder question than most people would think it would be. Um, but and it's kind of a long-winded answer, but you want the disc to go in the basket, which
Correct.
yeah, I mean, and that's really the extent of it. But I mean, you could go. I'll let you go a little more in depth on that, Mac. But that's you want it going in. Like a lot of people
Yeah, yeah.
think you want it going out, but
Right.
obviously, you know,
That is a
that's
common
wrong.
misconception. Yeah. It is
Yeah,
supposed to end up in the basket.
in the
Um
basket.
no, the answer is it's kind of hard to diagnose without any other information. A lot of it, I'll say my general mindset on putting. It is basically consistency and confidence, right? So consistency you get from putting thousands of times in the backyard, right?
Yep,
Confidence you get from not only that, but seeing yourself do it successfully on the course.
yep,
And part of that confidence, which I am of the mindset, and I think most people are, that putting is majority mental once you like actually put in the reps.
absolutely.
Um, but part of that confidence is actually being nice to yourself, right? So like
Yep,
this took me a while to understand where I am my own worst critic. I am so mean to myself by nature when it comes to sports. And so I had to like teach myself, it's fine. You missed a putt, whatever. Get mad about it later. And saying, okay, I lean heavily into my percentages. I know what my percentages are from certain distances. So like I don't stress it too much if I miss a 45 footer. It's like, yeah, that's a whatever 40% make. I don't know.
yeah,
I'm not up to date on my 45 footer percentages apparently, but I distinguish it between must makes and like bonus putts, right? So if I get all my must
yeah,
make putts in a round, even if that means I miss a circle one putt that was obstructed, whatever.
yep,
Um, but if once I start hitting those bonus makes, or if I miss like a wide open 15 footer, okay, yeah, that's gonna make me a little upset. But even then, it's about moving on from that. And so a lot of that is a mental aspect. And we've talked about this before, putting form. There's 100 ways to do it, or maybe more. And it's about finding what works for you. And there are some best practices, but at the end of the day, get out in the backyard, find what works, and be nicer
yep.
to yourself.
Hmm. That's an interesting concept, but I totally agree. I think, like you said, confidence is probably the biggest thing, and I think one of the main ways you can find confidence is just seeing a bajillion putts go in the basket. So,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be far in your backyard. You don't have to have a massive backyard to do this. Like, honestly, if you see yourself make, you know, if you can do 1,000 15 footers a day and you just see that putter go in the basket over and over and over and over again, then you're going to get pretty dang confident at putting, no matter what the distance is.
Right. Yeah. And kind of to that point, I always make it a point to end my like warm up putts before tournament rounds by walking up to like 15 feet and just putting and like making two putts and just
Yep.
watching myself make the putt, even if it's from that short of a distance. Because I do think there is a subconscious like, okay, yeah, if I have a 15 footer on the first hole, I'm not going to miss it because I just made two of them, right?
Yeah.
You're watching yourself make putts. And so I think little things like that are important. And I think too often I see people practicing for tournaments and they're like just trying to bang 45 footers. I'm like, dude, are you expecting to be 45 feet from the
Yeah.
basket? I'm not.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Funny that you mentioned the tapping out before a tournament. Is when I'm practicing. So how I do my field work is I basically take my bag of discs or I'll take all of my putters in my normal disc golf bag. So I'll have like 30, 40 discs, something like that. And I bring my basket to the field and I throw all of my discs out. And then on my way back, I throw them all back to the basket. and then when I get back, I pick up all the discs inside of 15 feet and put my 2 putters from every single other spot. But while
Mhm.
I'm doing that, if I miss a putt and I have a comebacker, I go and make both putters for the comeback putt. And if I ever have a tap
Yeah.
in, I always tap it in. Like every
Yeah.
single time. Like before I go to the next spot, my putters both have to be in the cage, and then I will go and go to the next basket. Like I'm tapping out at a tournament.
Right.
I will like release the disc entirely and then pick them both up
Okay.
and go. Like I don't know if it's a
Yeah.
confidence thing, but I absolutely have to do that.
I I like that. I'm here for it. Me personally, when I do field work, I do a similar thing where I'll set up a basket and I'll like use that as my aiming point and do different distances. And so I always judge myself for accuracy based on like a 25-foot radius,
Mhm.
and helps when, even if I'm right outside the 25 feet or just inside, it's like, oh, that wasn't that great of a shot. But if I go up there and I make the putt, it's like, doesn't matter.
Yep.
I could have put it 6 feet away, and it's the same score. So it's a
Yeah.
subconscious. It's building that confidence that is going to translate onto the course. Because I mean, your best rounds always come from, at least for me, when I throw a not great tee shot and I go, oh, it's a 40-footer, whatever, ching. Like it's you when you would know you're gonna make it, right? And I think everyone experiences that. We're like, I got a feeling this one's going in.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think everyone does. And I hope everyone has that feeling more often. You know, that'd be a
Me too.
great New Year's resolution is, for 2026, keep that on your books of, have more feelings that this is going to go in the basket more often.
Exactly.
All right, I think we wrap this one up. Thanks everyone for tuning in to the Form Lab podcast. We will answer all of the questions that you would like us to answer, so drop them all in the comment section, and we'll get to them maybe in the next episode, but we'll get to them at some point. So thanks for everyone for tuning in. Check out Formero if you want personalized disc golf coaching. We have a lot of great coaches on there. But thanks for tuning in.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mac. See everyone
Thank you,
next
Tristan.
week.
And everyone wish Tristan some luck at Waco this week.
Thank you, everyone.